This is topical because a UFC fighter recently spoke about this. Can you give the context?
Yes. Bottom line is, if you guys remember, several years ago, Colin Kaepernick, whose jersey I'm wearing, I'm a big Colin Kaepernick fan, and it's why I want to speak correctively on this issue. Jorge Masvidal is a UFC fighter, a pretty darn good one. He's from Cuba. He's a Cuban born native, and he had some retaliation for the fact that Colin Kaepernick was wearing a Fidel Castro shirt, if you guys remember that, along with the pig socks. And basically, Jorge came out and called him a coward because he did not appreciate Colin Kaepernick basically giving a positive view to Fidel Castro, who is a totalitarian military dictator. That's bottom line. He's oppressive, violent, and horrible to his people. Colin Kaepernick seemed to understand how that was taken negatively, and he responded, if you remember, and for those who don't, he basically said, I acknowledge that he did many evil things. I'm only talking about the good things he did. Mm-hmm. So that's really what I wanted to talk about real quickly. He was referring to the literacy rate in Cuba, which is one of the best, if not the highest in the world, and that they have free medical system, healthcare that is accessible to all universally. And basically Kaepernick was saying, are these not good things that we want here? Well, the ugliness of what Kaepernick said, unfortunately, which he was not aware of, I'm going to say this, he has a really good heart. It's demonstrated by the relief he has provided internationally when he bought that airliner to provide refugee relief overseas. He is very active in social movements that I really identify with. I think that anyone would. And he really is a good guy. But in this particular case, he erred. Fidel Castro, the way he was able to develop his system of governance was by building it on the backs of his people who are starving. They have no money. They are beaten for being dissidents. One of the women on my team, her name is Giselle Perez. She was no problem being mentioned here. Her grandfather was brutalized and killed by Fidel Castro's police force for being a dissident. This is how you build a perfect healthcare system. And literacy is there's the ugliness to the side of this dictatorship. I am from Tamazra, which is Marruecos en Español, Morocco in English. And we didn't have these issues with our people, but we were ruled by the French, a brutal colonial overlords. Yeah, they make good wine, but that's not what we talk about when we talk about the occupation. And Fidel Castro is not deserving of getting a silver lining. And that's the thing is, don't look for the silver lining. I mean, especially for someone who is so conscious about racial rights, which is so important in today's society. But some of the most famous writers, Jorge Perez, who is a black Cuban activist, he served 17 years in prison for asking for racial equality under Fidel Castro. Mentioning race is imprisoned automatically. Because of your demographic, you cannot ask for human rights. Esteban Dominguez, who is a great Cuban writer, I highly recommend his works. He documents the institutionalized racism within the penal system, specifically targeting the black population. So Colin, I love you. You're one of my favorite players in the history of the NFL. But this was a mistake, and I think Jorge Masvidal deserves a conversation, maybe with Colin, a good one, an open forum, because you have to realize when it comes from third world countries like I'm from, like Cuba, like Morocco or Algeria, our sisters to the east. Yeah, we accomplished some really good things under our dictatorships, but you don't realize sometimes if you just do a little bit of basic research, you see the brutality of a police state. And there are a lot of dictators. I'm going to bluntly say this. As somebody who's Amazigh, I'm sensitive to these issues. You will not see me wearing a Saddam Hussein shirt. There's no silver lining to people like that. They're just bad. Fidel Castro is just bad. And I have never met a Cuban who has told me that he was great. And that's why there are so many refugees coming here. And he should have looked deeper.
One more thing about Colin Kaepernick before we move on. One more takeaway from the Jimmy Ward interview that I thought was really interesting and kind of people glossed over. Someone asked Jimmy Ward, what's it like being the longest tenured player on the team? And he launched into it. He's like, well, I don't know if you remember what it was like, the culture on this team when I first got here, but it was awful. He says, first you had everyone retiring. Then you had all the Kaepernick stuff. And he's like, I don't want to get into that. And I know he had his reasons and I respect him. but the team was totally divided. And so, I mean, there was the fact that his political stance was divisive, but he also, the thing he pointed to that was interesting that has nothing to do with Castro, he said the thing between Kaepernick and Alden Smith, people forget, but before the stuff with Kaepernick kneeling, there was the stuff with Kaepernick not taking, but, you know, Nessa went out with Alden Smith first. And Alden Smith, I guess, still had feelings for her. When she started going around with Colin Kaepernick, his teammate, Alden Smith was very upset. I think he tried to there were fights in the locker room, and there was a blow up outside. And Alden Smith got kicked off the team. And I think that's what was originally divisive. And it's what Jimmy Ward referenced. And I think from their perspective, there was a lot of Alden Smith support in that locker room because they saw him as the best player on the team and a future Hall of Famer.
Absolutely.
And they saw Colin Kaepernick as be the one kind of pushing him over.
Bad leadership on Kaepernick's part to involve these extracurricular politics, and romance has no place in the locker room. I'm sorry, it's a business, it's a football team, and if you're going to be the captain, be loyal to your men.
People forget about that, but that did happen.
Yeah, I will admit I forgot about that as well.
Yeah, that was like 4 or 5 years. That was like 6 years ago. I think that was the Tom Sula year. That was the Tom Sula year. I remember Torrey Smith came out after Alden Smith got cut, and he says, you know, it's a real downer. One of the main reasons I signed here was because of Alden Smith. He is one of the best pass rushers I've ever seen. Has Hall of Fame talent. It's a real shame. We just lost our
I would flat out say it. Alden Smith should have been the best pass rusher in NFL history.